Open Line tonight, we are talking about how this pandemic is impacting students and teachers and schools statewide. This is the third school year that it has impacted. So you can just think about all of the effects that we are talking about tonight. We'd love for you to chime in, and whether you're a staff member, a teacher, a parent, or a student watching at home, go ahead and give us a call, 615-737-PLUS. In the meantime, I'd love to introduce you to our wonderful guest. We have Beth Brown, who is the president of the Tennessee Education Association, and two teachers as well joining us. Josh Vaden, who is with Robertson County Schools, and also Paula Pendergrass from Metro Schools here in Nashville. Thank you all once again for joining us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Beth, I want to start by talking this half hour about the learning loss. I know just as a parent of students, when the state testing numbers came out in the spring, my jaw dropped. It was not good news. There are several factors that go into this learning loss. Tell me more about it.
So before I get to that, let's acknowledge just a couple of things. You know, in the spring of 20 and the summer of 20, everyone in the nation was lauding public school educators for the efforts that they were making. Yes. When they pivoted on a dime to continue providing, meals and education services to students when schools closed, when school buildings closed so abruptly in March of 20. That level of effort and that commitment has not changed since March of 20. What has changed is kind of the general narrative around public school educators, which is really heartbreaking when you consider the efforts that our educators are making to ensure that students are still learning despite disruption to their learning process caused by the pandemic. We heard Commissioner Schwinn when the test scores from last spring were announced. She began her remarks by talking about in her words, Herculean effort of Tennessee's educators. She acknowledged that while the test scores were extremely disappointing, not surprising, but they could have been a lot worse had it not been for the just tremendous effort of Tennessee's educators, parents, and students. So I think it's important to begin with that context. We know that the pandemic is now in its third academic year. It is going to be a multi-year process to recover from the extreme disruption to student learning. And that learning right now, it's not necessarily caused because students are sitting at home learning via a laptop or a computer rather than in person. The disruption right now is caused by a lack of a district's ability to plan. We don't have the ability statewide or district-wide rather for districts to move temporarily to remote instruction where everyone goes home for a couple of weeks to get the infection rates down and they're able to continue learning. What we have seen is just a significant percentage of districts across the state of Tennessee having to use inclement weather days and just closing their buildings because they can't staff them and because infection rates are so high. So students are sent home to play on their Xbox rather than to learn. And that is a significant disruption. Josh alluded earlier to what he's experiencing as a classroom teacher with students coming in and out of the classroom after an extended period of time. I can tell you in my 20 years, you hit a certain threshold of absences in your classroom and new instruction just kind of grinds to a halt. Because you can't move the entire class when you've got a significant percentage who are out. So that's a significant disruption. And then when we think about educators who are at home quarantining because they have been exposed or infected or because their children have, because let's remember, educators are parents too, we're dealing with all of it, that's a disruption to their classrooms learning as well. And so there are a lot of different factors that are playing into that. It is now a 3-year problem. It's going to be a multi-year recovery, but we're going to have to have patience. We're going to have to extend some grace and mercy, and we're going to have to trust that educators will continue to be committed to their students and continue to provide the excellence of instruction and demonstrate their professional integrity in every single thing that they do.
I would like to hear your perspective on this new way that we are going about closing schools, and that is just shutting down and using the inclement weather days. And I understand what Josh brought up and others about, kids are just at home doing nothing as far as school goes in the majority of cases, but those days theoretically, supposedly, are going to be made up with learning. So what is the harm in that? Tell me what I am not seeing as a parent in this strategy.
Okay, so there are a couple of considerations there. First, a district has a finite number of inclement weather days, and so once they have expended those, the instruction will be made up on the back end of the school year, which it doesn't make a lot of sense at the state level perspective. If the state is as committed to standardized testing as they are, making up the days on the back end is not going to have any impact on students' standardized test scores. So that's one thing to consider. The other thing to consider is with that finite number, if a district only has 10 days and they've just used 5 of them for COVID, and we have the winter that is being predicted, we're looking at extending the school year into, June. And then we also have to consider the fact that this past winter in January, the General Assembly passed a new law that requires that every district offers a minimum 4-week summer school. So you're looking at potentially a late release from school, then a 4-week summer school. You're getting into mid to late July potentially. You're right up on the beginning of the next school year. And what's alarming about that is, first, educators and students and their families will not have had a break. But 2, there's a lot of professional learning that goes on from our educators in the summer. There's also deep cleaning in our school buildings that occurs in the summer. And so if the janitorial staff doesn't have time to do that, you're not going to begin the school year with that nice squeaky clean building that we like to showcase at the beginning of every school year.
Let's jump to the phones. We have Linda on the line. Linda, you are our first caller of the night. We always appreciate somebody breaking the ice. Go ahead with your thoughts.
Explain something to me, if you would. They have mask mandates in some of the counties, but then I heard on the news that they can opt out because of the governor's executive ruling. And I mean, what good does it do? And it's obvious the parents, the governor, doesn't care about the health of the teachers and the staff and the children. They're more concerned about their political views.
Yeah, I think it has a lot of people scratching their head. Beth, is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, so Ms. Linda's correct that it is the governor's executive order that allows for parents to opt out of mask mandates adopted by local school boards. I will say that there are a couple of districts across the state that have leaned into their local control and are not allowing the opt-outs. And what we're seeing as a result are much lower infection rates in those districts. And quite frankly, those districts have not had to move to remote instruction or close their school buildings.
Mm-hmm. I just wonder, Josh and Paula, we'll start with you, Josh. What is the scene in Robertson County when it comes to a mask mandate and also any compliance with mask mandates?
In my district, we at one point, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, once we started to see that the trend was ticking right back up steadily in COVID infections, was that we made a request for students and teachers to go back to wearing their masks. But ultimately a request is not a mandate. And so also an understandable position given that, again, that executive order undercuts any possible effectiveness. I know that President Brown talked about those other school districts that are leaning into their local control. But I think for the majority of us, we probably don't feel like we have that room to maneuver in such a way.
Yeah, on any given class, how many kids do you have in there and how many wear a mask?
Out of a class, I'm thinking of my last class of the day, which is my largest one of about 29 students. And I can maybe count on one hand how many students are wearing a mask.
Interesting. Now, I know, Paula, in Metro, it has been a little different. Talk about leaning into a mask mandate, despite what the governor has said. Tell me what the situation there is at your school and the schools that you see around you.
Yes, thanks, Carrie. Currently, masks are still mandatory for Metro Nashville Public Schools, and we surveyed about 750 educators, and about 65% of the teachers that we surveyed wanted a mask mandate in school, while 50% indicated that they didn't feel safe when we did not have a mask mandate. And we have to recognize that vaccination rates have remained low, especially in Tennessee, and people under the age of 13, as stated before, still do not have access to the vaccine. Therefore, educators say, this makes masks a priority. And within, the majority of our 163 schools, that most of them are elementary schools where the students are 12 and under, and only about 40% of Tennesseans are fully vaccinated. So, we have still gone with the mask mandate, even though, right now parents are being able to give feedback on whether or not they are wanting to opt out. But right now, masks are still mandatory.
And do you see compliance among the kids?
Yes, we do see compliance, and I think that the compliance also is, coming from teachers as well, making sure that they mask up. One of the things that we have to continue to just do in Metro School is not masks are worn correctly. So that is something that we are continue to make sure that we communicate to all our educators and students as well.
Absolutely. Those little ones, of course, need extra lessons. Okay, we have to take another quick little break. We're going to do that and come back and wrap things up. Stay